My family calls me the gardener. It's not a term of endearment. It's a label delivered with a sigh, a gentle pat on the head that feels more like a dismissal. To them, my world of ancient seeds, dormant spores, and the patient art of coaxing life from forgotten soil is a quaint, if pathetic, hobby. My hands, perpetually caked with the rich, dark earth of my greenhouse, are a source of quiet shame at their polished dinner tables. I am Caleb, 32 years old, the family's resident dreamer, the man who chose dirt over dollars. What they don't see, what they can't comprehend, is that in this small, climate-controlled world, I am not a gardener. I am a resurrectionist. I am the sole custodian of the Elysian Archive, a private collection of the world's rarest and most resilient flora. These aren't just plants, they are biological miracles, survivors of ice ages and volcanic winters, each holding a genetic secret, a key to a lock humanity has yet to discover. My work isn't a hobby, it's a silent, sacred duty passed down from my grandmother, Alara. Today, however, the sanctity of my world was about to be trampled by a pair of expensive Italian leather shoes. Today, my older brother Richard was coming to visit. Richard, the family's golden son, a real estate developer who paves over nature and calls it progress. He moves in a world of concrete and steel, a world where value is measured in square footage and profit margins. He found me in the main atrium of my greenhouse, standing before the crown jewel of my collection. A single dormant seed pod suspended in a nutrient gel inside a pressurized biosphere. It was no bigger than my fist, intricately patterned and older than the pyramids. I call it the sunken cathedral. It is the last of its kind. Still playing with your weeds, little brother? Richard's voice boomed, echoing off the glass panes. He was dressed in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly operating budget. He didn't wait for an answer, his eyes scanning the greenhouse with undisguised contempt. Look, Caleb, I'll get straight to the point. I need you to sign the papers. I didn't turn around. My focus remained on the faint, almost imperceptible pulse of light from the pod's monitoring system. What papers, Richard? The papers for Grandma Alara's plot. The acre out by Miller's Ridge, he said, his voice laced with impatience. You know, the patch of useless thistle and rock she left you. Useless. He had no idea. That acre wasn't just land, it was a sanctuary. It was the only place on Earth with the precise soil composition and subterranean water source required to one day germinate the sunken cathedral. My grandmother hadn't left me a plot of dirt, she had left me a cradle. It's not for sale, I said quietly. I heard him take a step closer, the sound of his shoes crunching on the gravel path. Don't be difficult, Caleb. I have a consortium of investors ready to go. We're going to build a luxury resort community there. Infinity pools, a golf course. It's a 9-figure project. You have no idea the kind of money we're talking about. I have an idea of the kind of destruction you're talking about, I replied, finally turning to face him. The answer is no. Richard's face, usually a mask of corporate charm, tightened. This isn't a request. Dad and Mom are on board. They agree it's time you stop this fantasy. They see it as an intervention, for your own good. We're offering you a generous payout. 7 figures. You'll be set for life. You can build 100 of these glass boxes and play with your little plants until you're old and gray. He saw my life's work as a childish game. He saw my inheritance, my sacred trust, as a roadblock to his next big score. The condescension in his voice was a familiar poison. It was the same tone he used when he'd explained my career to his friends as artistic botany. The same tone my father used when he'd ask if I was ever going to get a real job. The land is not yours to sell, I said, my voice hardening, and my answer is final. He took a menacing step forward, his shadow falling over me. He was taller, broader, a man used to getting his way through intimidation. You're a fool, Caleb. You're sitting on a gold mine and you're too busy staring at a nut in a jar to see it. But you will sign. Mom and Dad are worried about you. They think you're losing touch with reality, obsessed with this legacy. It would be a shame if they had to take legal steps to protect you from yourself. The threat hung in the humid air, thick and suffocating. Power of attorney, a competency hearing. He was threatening to have me declared mentally unfit to strip me of my inheritance, to destroy my grandmother's legacy for a golf course. Get out of my greenhouse, Richard, I said, my voice dangerously low. He chuckled, a cold, sharp sound that had no humor in it. He straightened his tie, his confidence returning. Think about it, little brother. The easy way, or the hard way. The choice is yours. But either way, the bulldozers are coming. I'll have your signature within the month. He turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the silent, sleeping giant in the biosphere, the hard way. I looked at the sunken cathedral, its ancient promise now under siege. He thought this was a fight about money and land. He didn't understand. This was a fight for the future itself. And he had just started a war with a man who learned patience from things that sleep for millennia. The silence Richard left behind was heavier than the humid air of the greenhouse. It was a silence filled with the grinding of gears, the whine of chainsaws, the future he had so casually laid out for me. For a moment I allowed the anger to wash over me, a cold, clean fire. He thought I was a passive dreamer, a man who talked to plants. He was about to learn that the most dangerous things on earth don't roar, they grow. I didn't waste time. I went to my grandmother's old workbench, a slab of weathered oak tucked away in a corner of the propagation lab. My hands, which Richard saw as fit only for digging, moved with precision across a digital tablet, my fingers flying through layers of encrypted files. The Elysian Archive wasn't just a collection of plants. It was a fortress of information. I cross-referenced soil strata reports from Miller's Ridge with my grandmother's private geological surveys, building a wall of data that would be meaningless to a man like Richard, but irrefutable to any serious scientist. The next afternoon, a courier delivered a thick manila envelope. Inside, the letterhead was from a high-powered law firm in the city. The language was cold and clinical, formally notifying me of my family's intent to petition for a conservatorship, citing my disassociation from financial reality and obsession with an unproductive enterprise. They had scheduled a preliminary hearing. It was happening. Richard wasn't bluffing. Then came the phone call I was dreading. My mother. Her voice was a fragile, trembling thing wrapped in a blanket of feigned concern. "Caleb, darling, we need to talk, all of us. Your father and I are having a small dinner tonight, just family. Please, for me." It wasn't a request. It was an emotional summons. The dinner was an ambush dressed in fine china and roasted chicken. My father, a man whose spine had long since been replaced by a checkbook, sat at the head of the table. Richard was to his right, a picture of smug triumph. My mother fluttered around, avoiding my eyes. "Son," my father began after the plates were cleared, "we do this because we love you. Richard has presented us with a remarkable opportunity, a chance to secure this family's future for generations, a chance to secure your future." "My future is secure," I said, my voice even. "I have my work." Richard scoffed into his wineglass. "Your work involves talking to compost, Caleb. My work involves creating hundreds of jobs and a legacy." "You're destroying a legacy, not creating one," I shot back. "Enough." My father's voice cracked like a whip. "You are being selfish. You are clinging to a sentimental fantasy while a real, tangible fortune is on the table. Your grandmother, bless her soul, was an eccentric. She didn't understand the value of that land. We are simply acting as responsible stewards of this family's assets." "And I am acting as the responsible steward of her dying wish," I said, pushing my chair back. "You talk about value, but you don't even know what you're trying to destroy. You see a patch of weeds. You have no idea what's really there." My mother finally spoke, her voice pleading. "Caleb, please, don't make this harder than it has to be. We just want you to be happy, to be normal." Normal. The word landed like a stone. They wanted me to be like Richard. That was their vision of happiness. I looked at their faces. My father's stern disappointment, my mother's tearful anxiety, my brother's predatory grin. I was utterly alone. "Thank you for dinner," I said, standing up. "But I will not sign. Not now, not ever. If you want a fight, Richard, you will get one." I walked out, the door closing on their stunned silence. I drove back to the greenhouse, the city lights blurring through my windshield. For the first time, a sliver of true doubt entered my heart. How could I, a lone gardener, fight the combined wealth and legal power of my entire family? They had money, lawyers, and the conviction that they were right. What did I have? Dirt, seeds, a promise made to a woman who was gone. I walked into the humid darkness of the atrium, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and night-blooming jasmine. I stood before the sunken cathedral, its pod glowing faintly in the moonlight. I felt a surge of despair. And then I remembered my grandmother's words, something she'd told me when I was a boy, struggling to cultivate a rare, stubborn fern. Don't just look at the leaves, Caleb. The real secrets are always in the roots. The deepest roots find the hidden streams. It was a riddle, a clue I had never understood until now. It wasn't about the fern. My heart began to pound. There was one plant in the entire collection whose root system was a complete enigma, the noctuacoelum, the midnight orchid, a strange bioluminescent flower that my grandmother had cultivated in absolute secrecy. Its roots didn't grow down. They wove themselves into a complex, spherical lattice just beneath the soil. With trembling hands, I went to the orchid's terrarium. Following an instinct I couldn't explain, I gently pressed 3 specific points on the gnarled root ball, a sequence my grandmother had once shown me, calling it waking the flower. I felt a soft click. A section of the terrarium's stone base slid away, revealing a hollow compartment. My breath caught in my throat. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay 2 objects. The first was a slim, leather-bound journal, its pages filled with my grandmother's elegant, precise script. The second was a device I'd never seen before. It was made of a dark, non-reflective metal, shaped like a handheld compass, with a crystal lens and a single unmarked dial. I opened the journal. It wasn't a diary. It was filled with cryptic notes, complex biochemical equations, and names, a global network of people I'd never heard of. One name was circled in red ink, Dr. Aris Thorne, and beside it a note. If they come for the cradle, Aris will understand the frequency. He knows what the archive is for. My eyes darted to the strange device, the frequency. I picked it up. It was cool and heavy in my hand. Turning the dial, I aimed the crystal lens at the biosphere containing the sunken cathedral. I pressed a small stud on the side. The device hummed to life, and a string of shimmering green data scrolled across the lens. It was a biosignature reading, a scan of the seed's internal structure and energy output. And at the bottom of the data stream, a single, unwavering number blinked, a number so impossibly high it defied the known laws of biology. A slow smile spread across my face. Richard had lawyers. My father had money. But I had this. I had proof. They thought they were trying to pave over a worthless acre of land. They had no idea they were trying to bulldoze a power source. The discovery in the Midnight Orchid's terrarium changed everything. The despair that had gnawed at me was replaced by a cold, humming resolve. My grandmother hadn't just left me a duty. She had left me a weapon of truth. The next morning, I began my counteroffensive. I didn't call a lawyer. I called a chartered flight. My destination, Bern, Switzerland. Dr. Aris Thorne, according to my grandmother's journal, was a semi-retired professor of exobiology and deep earth botany at the University of Bern. The journal contained a series of what looked like star charts and geological coordinates, a path leading directly to him. It was a leap of faith, cashing in the last of my liquid savings, but Richard had left me no choice. I found Dr. Thorne not in a sterile university lab, but in a small, cluttered antique bookstore tucked away in Bern's old town. He was a small man with a cloud of white hair and eyes that sparkled with an almost mischievous intelligence. He looked up from a dusty tome as I entered, a bell chiming softly above the door. "Can I help you?" he asked in lightly accented English. I didn't waste words. I placed the metallic device on the counter between us. "Alara sent me," I said. His eyes widened and all pretense of a simple shopkeeper vanished. He looked at the device, then at me, his gaze sharp and appraising. "The resonator," he whispered, his hand hovering over it as if it were a holy relic. "She finally found someone worthy of it." He gestured for me to follow him, leading me through a curtained doorway into a back room that was a stark contrast to the front. It was a modern, high-tech command center, filled with monitors displaying seismic data, atmospheric readings, and satellite imagery. "You're her grandson, Caleb," he stated, not as a question. "I've been expecting a call for a decade." I showed him the resonator's reading of the sunken cathedral. I showed him the conservatorship papers. I told him about Richard's plan to build a resort on Miller's Ridge. Aris listened patiently, his fingers steepled. When I finished, he stared at a global map on one of the screens, dotted with blinking lights. "Your family does not understand," he said, his voice grave. They are like children playing with matches in a munitions depot. The Elysian Archive is not a collection, it of several fail-safes, beacons. Beacons for what? I asked. Eris turned to me, his expression deadly serious. For us, a network she called the Gardeners. We are scientists, historians, engineers, guardians. We monitor the planet for catastrophic environmental events. Not climate change, not pollution. Those are symptoms. We watch for the deep cycles, the planetary fevers, the kind of events that cause mass extinctions. He pointed to a graph on a screen showing a sharp, upward trending curve. One of those fevers is beginning, a cascade of geological and atmospheric changes that has been dormant for 50,000 years. Your grandmother's work, the sunken cathedral. It is not just a rare plant. He zoomed in on a satellite image of Miller's Ridge. With a few keystrokes, he overlaid a new set of data, a subterranean map created from deep-ground sonar. The image revealed a massive, impossibly complex network of caverns and channels directly beneath the acre of land my family wanted to pave. The sunken cathedral, Eris explained, his voice filled with awe, is a bioengine, a planetary terraforming unit. When planted in that specific soil matrix and hydrated by those specific subterranean springs, its root system will integrate with that cavern network. It will release a cascade of engineered extremophile microorganisms, microbes that will stabilize the planet's atmosphere and biosphere from the inside out. It is a world-saving, self-sustaining biological machine. It is, for lack of a better term, Plan B for life on Earth. The weight of his words settled on me, a physical pressure, my hobby, my useless patch of weeds. The full scope of my grandmother's genius, her foresight, hit me with the force of a tidal wave. Your brother doesn't want to build a golf course, Eris continued, his tone turning cold. He wants to build a tomb, the excavation, the concrete foundations. It would collapse the caverns and poison the water source forever. He wouldn't just be killing a plant, he'd be destroying humanity's single greatest hope for surviving what's coming. While I was in Bern, Richard was moving fast. He had convinced a judge to grant an emergency injunction barring me from accessing my own property, the greenhouse. He claimed I was a flight risk and liable to destroy valuable family assets. He sent me a smug text, "Checkmate, little brother. See you at the hearing." But I was no longer playing his game. Eris Thorne made a series of encrypted calls. Within hours, the world's most respected botanists, geologists, and climate scientists began receiving anonymous data packets. They contained the resonator readings, the subterranean maps of Miller's Ridge, and excerpts from my grandmother's research, all scrubbed of any mention of the Elysian Archive, but presenting an undeniable scientific case. The emails ended with a simple invitation to a private webinar, hosted by the reclusive and legendary Dr. Eris Thorne. I flew back to the States the day before the hearing. I didn't go to my greenhouse, which was now patrolled by private security. I went to a hotel and waited. The next morning, I walked into the sterile, wood-paneled courtroom. My family was there, huddled with a team of lawyers. Richard gave me a look of pure pity. My father wouldn't meet my gaze. My mother looked like she was about to be physically ill. Richard's lawyer stood up, his voice smooth and condescending. "Your Honor, we are here today out of profound concern for my client's brother, Caleb. He suffers from delusions, believing a common weed patch to be a sacred trust. He has squandered his savings on a flight to Europe and is now barred from the property he has so fanatically guarded. We are asking the court to grant a conservatorship to protect Caleb from himself and allow the family to make responsible decisions regarding their shared assets, specifically the undeveloped plot at Miller's Ridge." The judge looked at me over his spectacles. "Mr. Sterling, do you have legal representation?" "No, Your Honor," I said, my voice calm and clear. "But I do have a presentation." I walked to the front of the courtroom and connected my laptop to the court's monitors. Richard smirked, expecting a slideshow of flowers. Instead, the face of Dr. Eris Thorne appeared on the screens, live from Bern. Behind him, a panel of a dozen other faces, the world's leading scientific minds from MIT, Oxford, and Tokyo University. "Good morning, Your Honor," Eris said, his voice filling the room with quiet authority. "My name is Dr. Eris Thorne. My colleagues and I are here today to provide expert testimony regarding the parcel of land known as Miller's Ridge. What you are about to see is not a matter of family finances. It is a matter of global security. Richard's smirk vanished. My father's jaw dropped. The lawyers began to whisper frantically. On the screens, Eris pulled up the geological surveys, the biosignature data, the extinction cycle graphs. He began to speak, not in the cryptic language he'd used with me, but in the cold, hard, irrefutable language of science. He didn't mention a bio-engine or Plan B. He framed it in terms they would understand. A unique geological and biological asset whose disturbance could trigger unforeseeable and potentially catastrophic seismic and atmospheric consequences. He was turning Richard's 9-figure project into a multi-trillion-dollar liability. The room was silent, captivated. The judge leaned forward, his expression rapt. I looked over at my brother. The color had drained from his face. He was no longer a predator. He was prey. And a pack of the world's most brilliant wolves had just descended upon him. The courtroom, once a theater for my family's drama, transformed into a high-level scientific briefing. Dr. Thorne and his panel of experts were relentless. They spoke of Miller's Ridge not as real estate, but as a linchpin in a global ecosystem. They presented data on seismic resonance, deep earth water tables, and unique atmospheric ionization patterns directly above the plot. They never used the words alien or magic. They used words like unprecedented symbiotic biome, keystone geological formation, and globally significant research opportunity. They buried Richard's golf course under an avalanche of peer-reviewed fact. Richard's lawyer, a man accustomed to arguing over zoning laws and property lines, was hopelessly out of his depth. He tried to object, calling the testimony irrelevant and speculative, but the judge, a stern woman in her late 50s, waved him off. "Counselor," she said, her eyes fixed on the screen, "Dr. Thorne is one of the most cited geophysicists of the last 30 years. I assure you, his testimony is anything but irrelevant." The final blow came from a quiet botanist from Kyoto. She presented an analysis of the soil from Miller's Ridge, a sample my grandmother had sent her years ago. She explained how its unique microbial composition was capable of nitrogen fixation at a rate that defied known biological models. To destroy this soil, she concluded, her voice soft but firm, would be like burning down the last library of a lost civilization to heat your home for one night. It would be an act of generational vandalism. When the presentation concluded, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. The judge peered down at my family. "Mr. Sterling," she said, addressing my father, and Mr. Sterling, addressing my brother, "were you aware of any of this?" My father stammered, looking helplessly at Richard. My brother, his face pale and clammy, shook his head. "No, Your Honor, we thought it was just land." "Just land," the judge repeated, her voice dripping with ice. "It seems your son, Caleb, the one you wish to declare incompetent, is the only person in this room who understood the true value of his inheritance." She looked at the petition for conservatorship on her desk as if it were a piece of garbage. "This hearing is over. Petition denied, and I am issuing a temporary court-mandated protective order over the Miller's Ridge property. Nothing and no one will touch that land without a comprehensive federal environmental impact study. A study which, given the testimony I've just heard, is unlikely to be approved in our lifetime." She banged her gavel. "We are adjourned." It was a total devastating victory. I watched my family crumble. Their team of high-priced lawyers looked bewildered. My father seemed to have aged 10 years in an hour. My mother was weeping silently into a handkerchief. But my focus was on Richard. He stared at me across the courtroom, his eyes filled with a toxic mixture of hatred, disbelief, and for the first time, a flicker of fear. I hadn't just beaten him. I had annihilated his reality. I had taken his 9-figure dream and turned it into a worthless, untouchable pile of dirt. I walked out of the courtroom without a word to them. As I reached the marble corridor, Dr. Thorne's face appeared on my phone. "Phase 1 complete, Caleb," he said, a rare smile on his face. "The cradle is safe, for now, but they will not give up so easily. Men like your brother do not accept defeat, they escalate." He was right. The fallout was immediate and brutal. The consortium of investors Richard had courted for his resort pulled out, citing the legal and environmental risks. The news of the court hearing, framed as a corporate developer being shut down by a coalition of international scientists, leaked to the financial press. Richard's company stock plummeted. He was facing professional ruin. That evening he came to the greenhouse. The private security guards my family had hired were gone, dismissed after the judge's ruling. He bypassed the main entrance, using a side gate he knew from our childhood. I found him standing in the atrium, not in a suit but in jeans and a frayed jacket. He looked ragged, unhinged. "Who are they?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. "Those scientists, who are they to you?" "They're my grandmother's colleagues," I said simply, standing my ground. "Don't lie to me," he roared, taking a step forward. There was more to it, that look on their faces, in stature. They weren't just talking about soil. What is on that land, Caleb? What is the real secret? "The secret is that you were wrong," I said, my voice cold. "You were so blinded by greed you couldn't see the truth right in front of you. That's the only secret there is." He stared at me, his chest heaving. The rage in his eyes slowly curdled into something uglier, something cunning. "Fine, you win this round, you and your secret club of professors. You've saved your precious dirt. But you made a mistake. You showed your hand. You revealed that the land is important. And now I'm not the only one who knows." A chill went down my spine. "What did you do, Richard?" He smiled, a broken, terrifying smile. "My investors weren't just businessmen, little brother. They have connections to people who don't care about court orders or environmental studies, people who specialize in acquiring unique assets that are difficult to reach." He pulled out his phone and showed me a text message. It was a single line from an unsaved number. "We are interested in the Miller's Ridge asset. Your family dispute is an obstacle. We will remove it." "They think you are the obstacle, Caleb," Richard whispered, his eyes gleaming with a mad light. "They think you are the only thing standing between them and a priceless discovery. I told them you wouldn't sell, that you were the sole guardian. I couldn't get the land, so I sold them the next best thing. I sold them you." My blood ran cold. He hadn't just lost. He had lashed out. He had painted a target on my back, pointing a far more dangerous enemy in my direction. My family had tried to take my legacy with lawyers. These people, whoever they were, would use force. Suddenly, the greenhouse's emergency systems blared. Red lights flashed, and steel shutters began slamming down over the glass panes, plunging the atrium into a crimson-lit twilight. On my wrist, a watch-like device my grandmother had left me, one I'd always thought was just a sentimental keepsake, began to vibrate, its face glowing with a single word: breach. I looked at Richard. He hadn't triggered the alarm. He looked as stunned as I was. The security system wasn't just an alarm, it was a lockdown protocol, and it hadn't been activated from the inside. It had been activated remotely. A calm, familiar voice came over the greenhouse's internal comms system. It was Eris Thorne. "Caleb, stay calm. They're here. We've been monitoring them since your brother made contact. We are activating the sanctuary protocol. Do not leave the atrium. We are on our way." Through the last gap in the shutters, I saw them. 2 black, unmarked vans screeching to a halt outside the main gate. A dozen figures, clad in black tactical gear, swarmed out. They weren't here to negotiate. They were an extraction team. Richard stared, his face a mask of horror. "My God, what have I done?" he breathed. He had thought he was sixing a corporate raider on me. He had just invited a paramilitary force to my doorstep. The gardeners were on their way, but they were in Bern. I was here, trapped in a glass box with the brother who had just tried to have me killed. The greenhouse, my sanctuary, became a cage lit by the hellish red glow of the emergency lights. The sounds from outside were muffled but clear. The heavy thud of tactical boots on gravel, the sharp crack of a bolt cutter severing the main gate's lock, and the low, disciplined voices of a team systematically breaching my defenses. Richard, stripped of all his arrogance, was a ghost, his face ashen. They weren't supposed to," he stammered, backing away toward the shadows of the giant ferns. "They were never going to pay you, Richard," I said, my voice cutting through his panic. My own fear was a cold knot in my stomach, but my grandmother's training, the years of quiet discipline, took over. They were going to take the land, take the secret, and erase everyone who knew about it, including you. A loud metallic bang echoed through the atrium as the team began working on the main doors. Eris's voice crackled over the intercom again, this time with a new urgency. "Caleb, they're using a thermal lance on the door frame. You have less than 2 minutes. The atrium is your strongest point, but it will not hold them forever. You must protect the cathedral. Protect the cathedral. The words ignited a purpose within me. This wasn't about my survival. It was about the seed. I ran to the biosphere, my mind racing. The sunken cathedral was safe inside its pressurized sphere, but the sphere itself was vulnerable. If they breached it, the sudden change in atmosphere could shock the ancient seed into permanent dormancy, rendering it useless. My eyes scanned the base of the biosphere. There was a manual release valve, a fail-safe my grandmother had designed. I had never used it. Her notes said it was for a catastrophic power failure, a last-ditch effort to move the seed. A section of the atrium floor beneath the biosphere was designed to retract, dropping the entire unit into a sub-level transport tunnel that led directly to the Miller's Ridge property. It was a one-way trip, a final gambit. As I reached for the valve, Richard grabbed my arm, his eyes wide with a desperate, selfish terror. "What are you doing? We have to hide! Give them what they want!" "They want it, Richard," I yelled, shoving him away. "And if they get it, there's nothing left to save." I twisted the heavy valve. With a hiss of depressurizing gas, the locking clamps around the biosphere retracted. The ground beneath it began to groan. At that moment, the main door burst inward with a deafening crash. Two figures in black tactical gear, armed with silenced rifles, poured into the atrium, their weapons' laser sights cutting red lines through the dim light. They were professionals, moving with a chilling efficiency. One laser dot settled on my chest. I braced for the end, but before they could fire, a section of the glass ceiling above them shattered inward. A figure descended on a thin, high-tensile wire, moving with impossible speed and grace. It was a woman, clad in a dark, form-fitting suit similar to the intruders, but sleeker, more advanced. She landed silently, two short electrified batons in her hands. She was one of them, one of Eris's gardeners. She moved like a blur, a whirlwind of precise, disabling strikes. The two intruders were on the ground, twitching from the electrical shock, before they even had a chance to adjust their aim. She never looked at me. Her focus was on the new threats pouring into the room. The section of floor beneath the sunken cathedral finally gave way, and the entire biosphere, a million-ton marvel of engineering, began its slow, majestic descent into the tunnel below. The intruders saw what was happening. Their leader shouted, "Forget the target! Secure the asset!" They abandoned me and Richard, rushing toward the descending sphere. The gardener intercepted them, a graceful, deadly dance against overwhelming odds. She was buying me time. Time to do what? Then I remembered my grandmother's final lesson. The best defense, Caleb, is not a wall. It is a seed of doubt. I ran to the main control panel for the greenhouse's irrigation and atmospheric systems. Richard, seeing his chance to be a hero, or perhaps just to save his own skin, scrambled to help the gardener, grabbing a heavy terracotta pot and hurling it at one of the intruders, creating a momentary distraction. It was a clumsy, pathetic gesture, but it was something. I slammed my hand down on a sequence of controls, overriding all safety protocols. The misters hissed to life, not with water, but with a fine, aerosolized cloud of highly concentrated pollen from a dozen different species of hallucinogenic and psychoactive plants in the collection. The air vents roared, pumping in a cocktail of disorienting spores and pheromones. This was my home turf. I knew every molecule in the air. The effect on the intruders was immediate and devastating. Their discipline shattered. One man began swatting at invisible insects. Another stared at his own hands as if they were alien creatures. Their leader, fighting the effects, raised his rifle, but his aim was unsteady. Through the swirling, pollen-filled mist, I saw the gardener give me a sharp nod of acknowledgement before firing a grappling hook into the ceiling and ascending, vanishing back into the night as silently as she had arrived. The mission was to protect the cathedral, and now that it was secure in its subterranean passage, her job was done. The wail of police sirens grew louder. Aris, ever the strategist, had not only dispatched his agent, but had also made an anonymous tip to the local authorities about an armed home invasion. The remaining intruders, confused and disoriented, were caught between a gardener's biological warfare and the approaching law. They retreated, dragging their downed comrades with them, melting back into the night just as the first police cars swerved into the driveway. When the police burst in, They found me and Richard standing in a haze of pollen, the air smelling strangely of nightshade and orchids. They saw the broken door, the discarded tactical gear, and two brothers, one calm, the other trembling, standing in the ruins of a botanical paradise. The investigation was a whirlwind of confusion. The mysterious corporation Richard had dealt with vanished without a trace. The shell companies dissolved. The black-clad soldiers were ghosts. Richard, facing federal charges for conspiring with an unknown hostile entity, cooperated fully. He told them everything, his voice a monotone of broken regret. He painted himself as a fool, a greedy man who had made a deal with the devil. He never mentioned the sunken cathedral. He never mentioned the gardeners. He only spoke of a priceless geological asset that he had tried to steal from his brother. In the end, his confession and cooperation, combined with the lack of any real evidence of the shadow organization, earned him a reduced sentence, 5 years in a minimum security prison. Months later, I stood on Miller's Ridge. The land was now a designated federal research sanctuary, fenced off and protected. Under a starry sky, I knelt and placed my hand on the earth. I couldn't see the sunken cathedral, now safely nestled in its cavern deep below, but I could feel it. A faint, rhythmic pulse, like a sleeping heart, resonating up through the soil. Its work had not yet begun, but it was ready. My phone buzzed. It was Aris. "The cradle is secure, Caleb. Your brother's former associates have gone to ground. For now, you are safe." "And the archive?" I asked. "The gardeners are securing the other sites. You did well. Your grandmother would be proud. You are not just a caretaker anymore, Caleb. You are a guardian." I ended the call and looked out at the silent, starlit land. My family had called me the gardener, a name meant to diminish me. They never understood. A gardener does not just plant seeds. A gardener cultivates the future, and my work had just begun.